Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Good Doctor's continuing coverage of Netflix's masterpiece, Unbelievable.
Just watch as we continue to add adjectives
and accolades. I am Dr. Kristen.
I am Dr. Erin.
And we're going to talk today about episode 3, which is the one where we really get to know Toni Collette. And we get to see exactly how much Marie's life has imploded. So just a couple quick themes of this episode. One is we're going to just focusing really quick on Washington. We see the continual disintegration of Marie's life and support system. Somebody leaks her name and picture to the papers. Her one foster mom who is there when this happens is terrible at her job.
Not great.
And further alienates Marie. Very thankfully, Marie has an ex-boyfriend who lives in the same complex as her.
Sweetheart. Connor is such a sweetheart.
Who rehumanizes her, I think, in a time in her life in which she felt like a villain. We also find out at the end of the episode that she's been given a criminal citation for false reporting.
Yeah, and like the fact that she goes from like being reanimated by Connor and literally comes back to her housing to find that citation. I was like, oh, it was
girl cannot catch a break.
It was such a gut punch. Yeah.
But most of the episode is spent in Colorado, going back and forth with Grace and Karen, Rasmussen and Duvall, because at this point, what we've established is that the dude who committed both of these rapes is the same dude. They take a little bit of the episode to cement that,
like to do the exposition.
But by the end of it, we see that they have merged their investigations. That they are treating this as a full thing. And a couple things that came out in that, first of all, for me, was the way that different people are different. I know it's like we say that a lot, but their leadership styles and how they both control and work with their teams are really different, and definitely different from mine. But the points that Karen especially makes to her staff when they were like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. I will tell you right now that I have responded to, oh, Dad, I'm sure it'll be fine, about some sort of like chemical test I need. And my father just blinks at me and goes, and you'll call the lab right now to make sure. And I'm like, yes, I will.
That was such a great thing. Oh, good news.
Good news. It's fine.
He's sure. Oh, it was
like,
so
I would
good.
never be that passive aggressive with an employee, but every single one of her points is accurate.
And for me, it was something that is brought up in numerous times in this season of episodes, and certainly I think even in this episode, in the second episode, is these two detectives kind of being the ones that have to remind people about what's going on.
The weight of this,
the weight of this, the impact of it. And I think it's in this episode that Karen has a line where she says, like, this is something that will never leave them. It's like a bullet to the spine that stays there. So like, and then there's another scene where Grace is talking to a man that she pulls in because he's walking around a riverbed at midnight.
As you do.
Next to an apartment building where a woman was raped a month earlier.
And he's like all indignant because he's like an environmentalist.
Why are you wasting my time? I was at a conference with 300 people.
And you can watch the videotape of my lecture.
And she has to lecture him that, like, look, and she uses the argument that I don't necessarily like when we're talking about sexual assault, that, like, you know, a woman in your life, would you want her treated this way?
Yeah.
Because we're just human beings, and you know, human beings, would you want human beings
but
treated
to like
this way?
drill through an asshole,
you have to use the relationship argument. And then at the end she's like, thank you for your valuable time. It's amazing. The saltiness, I feel like vindicated every time these ladies are salty. I'm like, yes, I am seen.
It's really, so Dr. Erin was reading a bunch of interviews with the creator, and we were one of the showrunners. We're going to put those all in the show notes for you guys, because this creator is somebody that we are now going to follow devotedly. But one of the points that she makes is that this story is incredible because while this one girl is drowning, there's two women 3 states away, 3 years later, building her a life raft. And watching that happen and kind of knowing, I know this sounds nuts, but like, we don't hear success stories in law enforcement, because if you hear the success stories mean we don't hear the story.
Yeah.
And it was like a kind of restoring a faith of like, oh, there are people that take their job seriously. And we have a lot of room to grow in this country about sexual assault, and we have a lot of work to do, but somewhere out there are more people like these two women.
Yeah.
And there are people that take their job protecting victims from a legal perspective as seriously as we take educating people about it.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those like, okay, the world is not completely falling apart.
Yeah. And I think too, like, because the show is focusing on kind of the systemic issues of reporting, of training for police departments and officers and detectives, this episode, we get some glimpses into some holes in the system that this rapist has exploited. So
they think he's probably a cop.
Karen and Grace start to think like, this guy knows a lot about DNA evidence and how DNA evidence is collected, and he's exploiting that. He also knows that police departments in different districts don't share information about cases, and that the reporting system online isn't super detailed, and is exploiting that because he's clearly hitting different districts knowing that they're not sharing the details. And it was just like, to me, the thing that amazes me is that it was just this absolute fluke, both in real life and in the show, that like Karen's husband just happened to work for Westminster PD and just happened to be collegial with, you know, Grace, and she shared the details of the case she was working on. And that's literally the only reason why they made that connection. But I think they do a great job of showing that there are a lot of systemic failures, and you have the system working against you, but it's possible to overcome it.
Yeah, that's a really good way to articulate it.
Yeah.
So overall,
yes, it is. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm so proud.
Agree with myself.
So proud.
It was so articulate.
It was so articulate.
Thank you.
So that's pretty much episode 3. I mean, this thing rips your heart out with a melon baller. So it's both a really empowering sit and a hard one.
Yeah.
And the episodes moving forward are not going to be any different. We cannot implore you enough to make everyone in your life watch this, if it's possible for them at all, because it is not only a stunning piece of art, but a really important conversation starter about international pandemic that has been plaguing humanity since time immemorial and will not stop. And therefore, the best ways that we have to combat it are to create safe spaces for survivors and justice for victims. So soapbox over. We will see you guys for episode 4,
where we continue to find out just exactly how many cases there are, because at the end of episode 3, the 2 entrepreneurial detectives have found a 3rd case in Aurora, which is another suburb of Denver. And we continue to find out just how many suburbs this douche canoe managed to hit. So
goody. We'll see you then.
Bye.